Today I'm going over the huge connection with ultra-processed foods and the growing population that is not only getting bigger, but sicker between diabetes, heart disease, and the prevalence of obesity here in the United States. Hi, my name is Christina Nicci, and I believe that knowledge is power. So today we're gonna go over the origins of ultra-processed foods, how they're affecting our health, also going over the different categories so that you can stay educated. And we're also gonna find out and dig a little deeper into what exactly we're teaching our children growing up compared to other countries. And most importantly, what we can do about it now and how to take action. Let's first take a step back and figure out how we got here in the first place. Now, it all started in 1896 with the creation of margarine by a French chemist. Now, the creation of margarine was initially made from beef fat, milk, and water. Now, I know what you're thinking, it doesn't sound too bad right now, but stay with me because that kind of kick-started the whole ultra-processed era. As the 20th century progressed, particularly during the World Wars, there was a substantial push towards foods that could be produced in mass quantities, stored, and shipped very easily. That's basically why they created canning, because they wanted to keep up and make sure that there was food that they could produce and store long-term, especially for soldiers. The problem with these creations was that they could be essentially cheaper, but void of proper nutrients. And this is especially seen in urban communities and people with less income. So even middle-class people, people that weren't able to afford better quality options, these ultra-processed foods were more widely available and just cheaper to buy in general. So during the 1950s and 60s in America, that's when you see like TV dinners and other processed foods emerge. These foods were especially common in people that were working multiple jobs and definitely to keep up with the ever-growing population, but also extremely busy lifestyles. This pattern links the rise in processed food consumption with increased rates of chronic disease such as obesity, diabetes, and also heart disease. In recent years, including the current day, we've seen ultra-processed foods expand not only throughout the US, but all throughout the world. In fact, we're now seeing them start to affect these blue zones. So people that were close to 100 or even beyond, we're seeing bad health effects as we've introduced ultra-processed foods to these areas as well. Now, this trend towards ultra-processed foods has not only affected human health, but also the environment. And honestly, that's a whole other subject on itself, but it's definitely something to note. Between carbon emissions, deforestation, and water scarcity, and even the dependency on chemical additives and preservatives has had long-term ecological impacts. So lately, there's a lot of concern. People are now starting to wake up and they're starting to see the pattern of where obesity and heart disease and other diseases and sickness started. And they're seeing a huge pattern and increase with the introduction of these processed foods. So there's a nice pattern that you can see if you look back. It gradually increased, and I think the scary thing is that a lot of these incidences didn't get reported. Some of the most recent findings now bring the gut microbiome into play. So for those that don't know, the gut microbiome is basically a collection of microbes, good and bad, that live inside our gut. And we now know that these gut microbes can speak to numerous areas in the body. They, speak to neurotransmitters. It's actually where certain neurotransmitters are developed. So we know that it communicates with the brain, we know that it communicates with the immune system, and also metabolism and even digestion. So it's the entire body that it speaks to. Unfortunately, the synthetic ingredients and additives found in ultra-processed foods are wreaking havoc on this delicate ecosystem. The problem begins when we start adding things in like preservatives, emulsifiers, unnatural sweeteners, dyes, and also even unnatural and so-called natural flavorings. What we're finding is that these compounds can alter the gut microbiome. It can promote the growth of harmful bacteria at the expense of beneficial ones. This imbalance is known as dysbiosis, which is basically something that can trigger inflammation in the body, a key factor in development of chronic diseases. Now, these ingredients in ultra-processed foods, they don't just alter the gut, they can influence the brain's signaling and wiring. An example of this would be artificial sweeteners. There's been some studies that show that we now can't control, or we can't decipher when we're hungry and when we're not. And these foods they're highly addictive, so they're messing with our brain and really causing us to not think, but just to eat. And just to put things into perspective, companies want this. They want you to keep buying these packaged foods. They don't want you to really think about it. They just want you to eat. As a result of all this, we experience cravings that are not driven by actual nutritional needs, but by a chemical-induced response designed to make us eat more, favoring calorie-dense and nutrient-poor foods. Moreover, the inflammatory responses triggered by these foods can lead to metabolic changes that do increase obesity, diabetes, heart disease, just to name a few. These are becoming widespread issues as the consumption of ultra-processed foods becomes more common around the globe. The scientific community continues to uncover exactly how these foods affect our bodies and basically to what extent they contribute to the rising rates of chronic illness. The evidence points to a clear need for a shift towards more natural, less processed diets to restore gut health and also to protect against these diseases. Now, at the beginning of this video, I said knowledge is power, right? One of the huge issues with ultra-processed foods and nutrition is education. The educational system here in America, and don't get me wrong, I love living in America, but there are definitely some changes that we need to make in the school system. Now, I did some research and I started looking at what children in America are eating versus children in other countries. Now, not all countries are getting it right, but there's definitely a few to note. And I'm sure if you guys have some in mind, you can also put them in the comments and let me know. Here in America, there's no nutritional curriculum standard. So it's really dependent on either the schools or even the states. So there's not something that's set in place and there's basically no rules. A lot of it also depends on funding, which is so ironic, right? Here we are paying taxes, but yet there's supposedly not enough funding for our kids, which is so crazy. That's a whole other subject in itself. In addition, even if there are some classes, what we're feeding the kids in schools is ridiculous. Ultra-processed foods like chicken nuggets, hamburgers, pizza, and I'm not talking good quality pizza or hamburgers. I'm talking ultra-processed crap. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the comparisons of a couple countries. Let's first start with Italy. Now, many of you might think that Italy is just about pasta and pizza, but that cannot be more far from the truth. In Italy, there seems to be a seamless integration of nutrition education with daily meals through national dietary guidelines, emphasizing the Mediterranean diet. Italian schools reflect these guidelines in their lunch programs, providing students with fresh, balanced meals. And while they might have a little pasta here and there, they still have wonderful fresh fruits, vegetables, legumes, and also lean cuts of meat. They're not just teaching nutrition, they're actually practicing it. Now, in Japan, particularly in Okinawa, the residents there are known for their longevity and also healthy habits. The food and nutrition education is actually an integral part of the curriculum. So it's not just about classroom lessons there, it's about hands-on activities like getting involved in gardening and having the students grow their own vegetables. This holistic approach extends to the meals served in their schools. They're carefully designed to reflect the traditional dietary practices supported by the entire community. Now, this definitely sheds some light on comparison with other countries, and it really puts a lot of things into perspective with what we're teaching the younger generation. Now, if we're serious about tackling issues like poor nutrition and obesity here in the US, perhaps it's time to take a leaf out of their book. We need a unified approach that not only teaches kids about healthy eating, but also gives them daily practice that they need to establish lifelong habits. Remember that change starts with education, and in this case, starts with the education in our school system. So the question remains, how do you tell what ultra-processed foods are? So there are 4 categories of ultra-processed foods. All right, so first we have minimally processed. Minimally processed is basically food. It could be something as simple as maybe like some fruit, so maybe like a little apple, you know, or an orange or something like that. Don't make fun of my drawing. But it could be something that's chopped up. It could be something like even like chicken or any type of like ground beef, things that are basically cut up but still retain their recognizable source, if you will. And then what we have after that is we have processed food, okay? So processed is basically food that, like, it could be a cookie, but it doesn't have any like preservatives. It's something that is a collection of ingredients that you can pretty much make from home. So even things like yogurt and cheese. So these are things that they don't necessarily look like milk, or they don't look like, you know, when you directly get it when you're making milk, or butter, even things like that, right? But they're still considered processed because there's a process in making them. So these are not necessarily bad foods unless there's something with like high sugar, like, you know, cookies, cakes, pies. All those things can obviously lead to weight gain as well, just like eating in abundance. But the most dangerous food we'll go over in just a second. Now the next thing is kind of in a different category. This is actually called processed culinary ingredients. Now, processed culinary ingredients are ingredients that you would cook with or bake with, or they're usually single serving ingredient, or they're usually single source ingredient. So think flours, vinegar, even olive oil, salt, spices. Those are considered processed culinary ingredients because they're broken down to some extent, but they are still retaining some of their nutrients. Now, there could be bad processed culinary ingredients like refined flours and refined sugars, but then there can be better processed culinary ingredients like vinegar, olive oil, other types of healthy oils, and also spices, right? And then you get into the category of full-on, ultra processed food. Ultra processed food is going to be the main category of what is linked to this sickness and disease and this issue that we have of destroying the gut microbiome. These are going to be foods that have one or more of the following. So they can either have preservatives, okay? I'm gonna label these. Preservatives. All right, they can either have preservatives, they can have food dyes, all right? They can also have food, what's the word I'm looking for? Natural flavors. So they can actually, let me erase this here. So they can have either artificial or natural flavorings. And this is a little deceiving because I feel like the term natural, you would automatically think, well, okay, it's great, but unfortunately, natural, they still add in stuff in order for it to become that flavoring. So it's not like they're just putting in vanilla extract unless they state it, which is why they actually have to label them as flavors instead of the actual source, because they're not really just the actual source. So that's a little tip for me. And then any type of any type of like synthetic vitamins. So any type of synthetic vitamins, any type of artificial anything, including, here's another one for you guys. And this is gonna be big because I know there's a lot of people out there that love their sweeteners, but artificial sweeteners. I'm writing so fast here. Sweeteners, that says sweeteners at the bottom there. Artificial sweeteners, those are so bad for you. So they can disrupt your hormones, they can disrupt the gut microbiome. If it has any one of these in here and any synthetic ingredient, chemical that should not be in your food, emulsifiers, it is considered ultra processed. So these are the foods that you do not want in your diet. And I get it, sometimes we go out and we want to enjoy a dinner with our family and we might go to a restaurant where we don't know where the source is, and sometimes that's going to happen, right? But I'm saying on a consistent basis, we shouldn't really be eating these foods. And that's part of the problem. The part of the problem is not The reason that we got to obesity and diabetes and heart disease and all these health problems that are prevalent in the United States are not from the occasional family meal. They are because people are consuming these products on a consistent basis, on an every single week basis. In our quest for healthier diets, accessibility and affordability can pose significant challenges. However, innovative solutions and also global best practices offer us viable pathways to make nutritious whole foods more widely available. Let's explore some of these strategies and see how we can adapt them to our lifestyle and communities. Firstly, farmer markets and local co-ops are excellent resources. Shopping at farmer markets supports local agriculture, reduces the cost associated with long-distance food transportation and marketing. The great thing about farmers markets is that you're guaranteed things are in season. In season is the way to go because food that is out of season often is more expensive, and that's because they have to cover shipping. Farmers markets ensure that it keeps the prices down and ensures that you're getting fresher and more nutrient-rich produce. Also, joining a food co-op can offer savings through bulk purchasing and volunteer work exchanges, making local and organically sourced food more affordable. Now, another great approach is community-supported agriculture, CSA. By purchasing a share in a CSA, you invest in a local farm at the beginning of the growing season and in return, receive a weekly or bi-weekly box of seasonal produce. This model benefits the farmer, and it also provides an upfront capital and guarantees a market for their produce, while consumers can enjoy lower prices for organic foods directly from their local farm. Another thing that I've seen popping up that I really love the concept of is urban farming. I think this is a wonderful idea. Turning city landscapes into productive green spaces is such a great idea and game changer in the community. Whether it's growing herbs on a windowsill or even just participating in a community garden, urban agriculture empowers city dwellers to take part in food production, reducing dependency on store-bought goods and fostering a community around local food security. Looking abroad, countries like Japan and even Denmark have implemented policies that significantly support healthy eating habits. Japan, for example, has the integrative nationwide nutritional system. By learning from both local initiatives and international practices, we can foster environments that encourage the consumption of healthy, affordable food. It's about creating systems that not only support sustainable agriculture, but also make it easier for people to make healthier food choices on a daily basis. Subscribe to my newsletter here, which is completely free, and you'll be able to gain access to our upcoming wellness platform, Blueprint 8, and also valuable health information.